is looking at the people that came in and how God used them. And regardless of how bad it got, and it gets bad, we talked about it ending in a civil war. It gets really bad, but God's finger is in everything throughout the book of Judges. And that is a lesson for us. I don't care where we're at. I have heard so many people this time around, let's call it this time around with COVID, and talking about the government and what's been happening. And now this must be the end of the age. They're the Antichrist and things like that. I heard that in 911. Oh, they're coming to my clinic back then and saying, oh, this is the end. This is what we got. It can get a lot worse, and we see it happening in Judges. But God is in through it all, and he's with his people. We are his people. So let's bring it back each time, if we can, to a positive of why this is good for us. We need to look at the human nature because we're human. How do we reverse this direction? Because we are human. We have that will. God's given it to us. So we're going to go ahead, as we go through it, when I'm putting these lessons together, I don't know, I'm that guy that teaches the youth class. That's who I am, right? And so I'd like to have fun when I'm teaching, but I always want to drive home a point because we've got to make it practical. So as I go through it, I'm going to say to you, hey, you know what? We've got some good stuff happening here. We're going to have a great beginning in this chapter. Let's look at it. Let's have some fun. Let's talk about it. And I always ask that those young youth interact with me because I'm sitting there teaching. If I get that deer in a headlight look, then I'm not teaching, am I? I'm just spitting out all this stuff and we're not going anywhere. So I don't want that deer in a headlight look. I want to be able to keep it basic enough that we are grabbing some meat out of the book of Judges, but at the same time, we're enjoying it and we're able to take it with us and see the lessons. So we've got a great beginning. Now, we're going to just get right into what are we going to talk about in a great beginning. Turn to Judges chapter 1, verses 1 to 15. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Because if I don't, you're going to say, what's wrong with them? Yours truly had surgery for detached retina 3 years ago. I am still struggling with reading. It distorted my eyes to the point on my left side that if I close my eyes, I know it's Grady back there, but he could be making faces at me and I wouldn't know it, right? Maybe I shouldn't tell you guys that. I have tried about 15 different pairs of glasses. Phil caught me when I first moved here. He asked me to do a reading. I don't know if you remember that. I had a hard time getting it out, and I was moving my eyes and I was turning my head, and probably thought I was like a chicken, it's like this, right? But so I still have trouble with that. So if I start to read and I start to bumble a little bit, it's because I actually lose the words. They distort. And so I have a new pair of glasses. I had them here 2 weeks ago, and they're kind of working for me. So if I put them on and I go like this, you know why? Okay, because I can't read that right now, but I can't leave this off. So if I go back and forth, I apologize. So just, if you would please bear with me. So as we look at, and by the way, I also now have to print out my verses. So I may not open my Bible a lot, but it's because I've had to actually pull them up, put on a point. So here we go. There's all my secrets. They're all on the table. We know that Judges starts after our legend Joshua, right? We talked about the legends. And these people now say, what do we do now? What do we do now? And they're in that place where it's like, we've had greatness, but how do we maintain that? Who do we look to? And so we see the very first verse, after the death of Joshua, the people of Israel inquired of the Lord, who shall go up first for us against the Canaanites to fight against them? And the Lord said, Judah shall go up, and behold, I have given the land into his hand. How does that make him feel? It's starting the book of Judges. How does that make us feel? Strong. Absolutely strong, right? We're strong in the Lord. We got this, right? So are they excited coming into the Judges chapter 1? Absolutely. There is nothing that they can't do, quote unquote, except they just ask the question, how do we do this? Do you see the conflict that's going to be going through their minds now? How do we do this? We don't have Joshua leading us. Oh, it's okay. Judah's going to step up to the plate. And here's what we talked about 2 weeks ago as well in our intro. How did we consider the children of Israel on the whole? Were they considered a nation yet, really? Or what were they considered as? Pardon? Tribes. They were tribes. And what do we know? What do we know about the tribes when their strength is on top of the world? What do tribes do? They work together. We talked about the family thing, right? Armstrong's against the Johnsons. One day I'd like to see that, actually. See how it goes. You'll hose us. That's a Canadian term. You'll hose us. That means we don't win. So when we look at this here, we have these tribes, and we say to them, you know what? If you guys are going to do this, you're going to work together. You're going to come together. And look what happens right there. And Judah said to Simeon, his brother, come up with me into the territory allotted to me, that I may fight against the Canaanites. And I likewise will go with you into the territory allotted to you. So Simeon went with him. Camaraderie. We're going to do this together. We got the Lord behind us. Let's go. We are ready. We are ready. And so what happens in verse 6 and 7? Can someone read that one for me, please? You're going to get into some bigger words, but just try. Just try. Verse 6 and 7, what do we read there? Okay. This has a lot of meat in it, believe it or not, and we're going to spend some time on this a little bit later in our lesson today. What is the number one occurrence that we see happening in what is being said here in 6 and 7? What do we see in here that will tell you an unbelievable amount of information about what was being thought about with the Israelites? This gentleman is not an Israelite that just spoke. What do we see in there? What is one very, very key part of his phrase that tells us a message has gone out? What did I hear? Bam! This God, and is it a small g or a little g? It is. This is the God of Israel. This is a Gentile king that is saying, God has repaid me. He's using the reference to the Israelite God. Is there fear being struck into these people at this point? Yeah. Yeah. I think that is absolutely huge, because we are now entering the book of Judges, and these people are just about to go out to go into battle, and there has been a fear already put before them, infiltrated into the kings, at least this one. We're going to find out if there's more here in a second. At least this one has been struck with a belief that God just repaid me for all that I have done. And so I think that's pretty cool, right? It's like, wow, I would rather go in that way than on the backside where Joshua started. Did they know? Well, let's not even go there yet. Let's not go there yet. So we've got Adonai-Bezek says that, 70 kings, and he does that, and he says, God's repaid me. Wow. So then, what do we see? What do we see happening here? Verses 12 to 15. I want to see the attitude now that is infiltrated within Israel. What do we see in 12 to 15? It begins with, and Caleb said, he who attacks Kiriath-Sepher, again, I don't know how to say that, and captures it, he will give him Achsah, my daughter, for a wife. And Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, captured it, and he gave him Achsah, the daughter, for a wife. When she came to him, she urged him to ask her father for a field, and she dismounted from her donkey, and Caleb said, here bountiful blessings. What is God pouring onto this nation? Bountiful blessings. And the people recognizing it, aren't they? They're actually walking up to the leaders and saying, I want this too. I want that too. I'm putting the mic back on, okay? So we're looking at this mood, this idea that, wow, I can pick anything. I've got it all coming to me. God's bringing it to us in all different directions. Go and ask Him for more. Let's get more. And they're reaping all these benefits. Is there anything wrong with enjoying God's blessings? No. Where is it in the Bible? It says, don't enjoy the blessings I give you, but be blessed. Why do we walk around with a frown if we're a Christian? We don't have to. It's not pride. It's not that we're boasting, but we should be happy in Christ. We should be boasting in the fact that we have joy that you can't find in the world. These people came into a land that was full of pagan worship, and they feared those gods that they were serving. Bless you. Weren't they fearing those gods, those pagan gods? How do we know that they were fearing their gods? This is an important step into our understanding of why God said, hey, you know what? Annihilate them. Get rid of all that stuff. Get rid of all that pagan worship. This is a keynote in the book of Judges, and we're starting in chapter 1. It's already here. What do we know about how the people served their little gods, the pagan world? What were they doing for their gods? Okay, I heard Miss Cindy. Can you say that again? They were sacrificing their firstborns. They had complete, huge monuments, and the god would be with his hands out, little god, with the hands out, and it was to put the baby on, and then they'd burn it. What else did we hear over here? Yeah, and you know what? Why did we both pick those up? Why did we pick that one up? It is absolutely horrible to think that I would go to a stone image and put my Stephen on it. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Would you have to have a different mindset to walk into an abortion clinic? Would you have to have a different mindset to put your firstborn on a rock? I'm sorry, but this is where we have to realize that when the Israelite went in, some people say, well, that was cruel that God was wiping all those people out. That includes women and children, too. They didn't say save the children. Oh, what a mean God. I don't think I'm going to get to that lesson, but I want to just mention, I didn't put it in my notes, it just kind of crossed my mind. That is one of the lessons that were in there. Why did God allow the children to die? He was teaching the youth class. You have to kill the root to get rid of the problem. You know what, Ms. Nell, that is really the essence of it, isn't it? If we allow the remnants to stay, does it eventually become the tree? It becomes the faith, doesn't it? And God knew that. And He said, go in and take it all out. Just weed it out. Get rid of it. And so people say, well, that's cruel. But you know what? Those children still went to heaven, didn't they? That was the point that speaker went. None of those children that the Israelites would have taken out are in hell. We're going to see them. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And the reason why I know that is my son that was going to school there, I said to him, you know, I'd like to go to that lesson, and we did. We went and sat that lesson. Because I just had some friends that had lost their child, and they said, how could God do this to us? Wow. They were not Christians. But that child is in heaven, and those parents still have a chance. Yes, Bill. Nice.
His purpose wasn't to force these people
Yeah.
to come and do what the Israelites were doing.
Yeah.
He allowed them. That's what first chapter of Romans said. He allowed them to become so degenerate that it finally came time for them to be eliminated.
Yeah. Yeah. Gave them over to sinful nature.
Through that process, then he used them.
Nice. And isn't that consequences? Consequences of sin. So God's in control. He allows the consequences. They are going to happen. And we see it all the time. Thanks. So I just got to share a friendly illustration. Nate, we got to talk about him right now. And it's timely because Nate just placed membership with his family where my brother's worshiping in Edmonton. He was way up north in Canada, and he just moved in his family to the congregation my brother's in Edmonton. So Nate is a gentleman from Trinidad. Nate is a minister. Nate had not really done a lot of ministry yet, and my brother and about 5 others were on a hiring committee, and Nate ended up getting the pulpit in the congregation where my brother was at the time. And so this goes way back, Nate and my brother. It's not by accident he ends up back in the congregation. And so Nate comes from Trinidad. And some of you, I keep on bringing up hockey. This might be the last time, but it's just illustration, just happens to have it in there, okay? No, it won't be the last time. But, so here comes Nate, and Nate comes to a hockey game with us. It is ice hockey, and we decided to do this one game, kind of like what Jeff did for us. We did this one game, we thought, well, we'll get about 10 or 15 people out. There was over 40 people there. And it's a very small rink, so we really cheered on the home team, which we didn't have. So we didn't really know. We just picked a jersey, said, let's play for those ones, cheer them on. And so we're there, and they have a contest. The contest is just for buying a ticket for coming to the game, where everybody's going to get a chance to come out on the ice, at 1 or 2, or I think there was just one actually for this contest, to come out and take a shot at the net. And if you get in the net, you get $50. Well, that's pretty cool. Now, if any of you ever shot on ice, it's not that easy because there's many people with shoes on go like this here, and next thing you know, you're on your back, right? Because it's slippery. Ice gets slippery. And so even just your gate ticket got you a chance to take a shot. Well, here's the rest of that. They put a plywood on top in front of the net. And that plywood had a little hole in the middle about the size of a puck and a half width, that wide, okay? That's how wide it is. And that's what you had to shoot it into to get the $50. Guess who got picked? There was probably 200 people there. Who got picked? Nate. Never stepped on ice in his life. He had just moved from Trinidad. This guy literally, and this is not a joke, he had 3 coats on that night. He had a scarf around his neck. He had we call them toques, okay? He had a toque, which you all call a beanie or, yeah, okay. He had toque on down, and this is Nate, and he comes in all bundled up because we had actually just gone to Goodwill and put it on him. That's how close he is to just arriving in Canada, and he gets picked. So he goes out on the ice, but before he did, I said, Nate, let me coach you, okay? Everybody looks at the net, and they look at that little hole, and that's what they shoot for. I said, Nate, you need to do it step by step. So if any of you ever get this contest here, now you know the secret. I said, Nate, what you do is you get behind the puck, and nobody will have a clue what you're doing. Get behind the puck, and you look at that hole, and you look at your puck, and you find something that's about 10 feet out, and that's what you shoot for. Don't even look at the hole. Just look for that out front. Okay, brother, he says, okay, brother. And so he goes out in the first period between the 3, because it's 20-minute increments, all right? So he goes up between the first 20 minutes, and he gets out there, and he gets behind it, but he didn't just get behind it and look for that thing 10 feet out. Oh, no, not Nate. He laid down on the ice. And everybody is absolutely howling. They do not know what he's doing, right? This big bundle of coats laying on the ice. And he gets up, and I can tell he's listening. He's like this here. I know what he's doing. Guess who got $50? Nate got $50. It was the first time it actually won that season. We were about halfway through the season, they said. First time this season, Nate wins the $50. Da-da-da. So this is why it fits in with our lesson. In that group of 40, there was about 10 kids that came with us. My kids were 8 of them. No, I'm not kidding. And so we get there, and he says, Garth, come with me. And I said, okay. Come with me, brother. So we go out, and he bought $50 worth of candy. Yeah. What do you think those 8 kids did, or 10 kids did, right? He took it back, and he said to the kids, okay, pick your candy. This is how I see Israelites right now. Here, pick your candy. Just pick it. Just whatever you want, whatever kind. Just pick the candy, you know? And so that to me is the mood that we're going into the book of Judges. It's an exciting time. It's a pile of candy, and you can have whatever you want. And that's kind of how I see this. So, it continues. Turn to verse 16. We're just going to read the verse, then we're going to walk it through, and then we're going to continue on. What do we see in verse 16? What happens? Can somebody read that for me? Geb. Thank you. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What is that called? What did they just do? They just compromised, didn't they? Who are they settling with? Who are the people? The heathens, the pagans. We just came out of a pile of candy. I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. Well, you know what? Maybe this is the cavity. You know? They're mixing with, they're settling with the people. Is it a confrontation? Does it sound like it's a confrontational settled? No. He's settled in with the people. He's settled in with the people. Wow. What about 19? Can somebody read 19? Sorry about the big words. Ooh. Okay, what's going on now? What's the occurrence here? Yeah, the grasshopper mentality, right? Oh, they got chariots of iron. And it probably would have been, right, Stephanie? Would you like to go up against a chariot of iron and be on your foot? No. These are real people. They're getting afraid. They forget what? They forget about God. They forget about God. What about the next one? Their faith is dropping, right? Right? So 21, can somebody read that one? Now, those Jebusites, that goes way back to Joshua's time, that they weren't driven out. So these are the things that start to happen. They're not doing what they were told to do. We call it the price of partial obedience. We're going to see it. There's going to be a price, and it's going to keep on going. What about this Judges 1, verse 22 to 26? Let's give that one a shot. The house of Joshua also went up against Bethel, and the Lord was with them. And the house of Joseph scouted out Bethel. Now the name of the city was formerly Luz. And the spies saw a man coming out of the city, and they said to him, "Please, show us the way into the city, and we will deal kindly with you." Stop. Stop. What's happening? What is that called? They're making a deal. They're cutting a deal. Is that what the Lord told them to do? What did they tell them? What did the Lord tell them to do? Wow. Here they go again. but does this sound so bad? Let's just back off. We're really hard on him here. Does this sound really bad to ask somebody about the city before you go in to take it and then say, well, thanks for the information, we're going to spare you? Does that sound so bad? There we go. It doesn't, but the Lord told you to destroy it, right? And if I keep talking, we're not going to get to, but we're going to have something to like this along the line at the end when we have when we wrap it up. So I don't want to go much more than that. But yeah, Lord said, and he showed them the way to the city, and they struck down the city with the edge of the sword, but they left, and I think it's interesting, right? What's the word? But. What's that? What's another word for but? Yeah, forget everything I just said, kind of thing. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, but they left the man and all his family. And the man went into the land of the Hittites. This was mentioned to me. This was mentioned to me last week. I just looked at Phil. I think it was you, Phil. But it's not the only time I've heard it. What do we know about the Hittites and the history of Israel? Let's say just in the time of biblical history. What do we know about the Hittites today? That's right. The Hittites were an empire, totally annihilated at one point, to the point where they didn't even show up in history until more recent. These are the things that happen when we see this happen, but isn't it interesting? That's where that man went. And our men of today, or back then, said, hey, you see, there's another place of Hittites. They didn't even exist. Boy, they sure did. They sure did. And isn't that interesting? That one family went in there. Could that family have made a difference in the future with pagan worship? Absolutely. It just takes one, right? And it was a compromise. And if we don't continue to keep that in mind, then what happens, right? So Joshua 10, we're going to quickly go over to Joshua 10, and we're going to spend a little bit of time there because I want us to kind of see the tone that was way back when that led up to this tone that we have today. So can someone just read 40 to 42, please? Joshua 10, verses 40 to 42. It's under the section of partial obedience, so I'm assuming we're going to have some partial obedience, right? Joshua 10, 40 to 42. I'm just going to add to that, but before I do, does this sound pretty decisive victories on Joshua's part? It's what they were told to do, weren't they? Based on what we see, he went in and he just a path of godly destruction. Am I right? It wasn't Joshua, it was godly destruction. This is what God wanted. And so Joshua 9, 1, 2, I'm just going to read this. Just one second here. No, we're going to leave that alone. But I'm going to bring this up to you because within the book of Judges itself, there is a list of kings and kingdoms that come up. And I got the notes here. Just give me a second. What I did is I extracted out a bunch of kingdoms that are mentioned, and I'm just trying to find it for a purpose here, and if I can find it. Well, we talked about archaeology, so I'm going to bring that up again, and if I see that list, I'll read it to you right away. But part of the going through the judges and just kind of picking out the different kingdoms to take out, it's kind of that same thing where they didn't really have history on these places. But there was a famous archaeologist, and his name was Dr. William Foxwell Albright. Many people will know him as W.F. Albright. That's what they would say, W.F. Albright, Dr. Albright, or W.F. Albright. And he was an absolutely famous biblical archaeologist. He took the passages of Judges and said, I'm going to go in and see, and he devoted his life to it, to finding these cities. This guy was a prodigy within archaeologists. And it says, Baltimore, September 19th, Dr. William Foxwell Albright, leading biblical archaeologist, died here today after having recently suffered a stroke. His age was 80. He deciphered languages. Dr. Albright made an international reputation by reconstructing ancient civilizations through the painstaking examination of artifacts. He would take pottery from all the ages, and you just give him a fragment, and he could break it down and tell you this is when it came from. I mean, today, scientists will put their faith in carbon dating. But you can get the same date on the same piece, 6 different time frames, right? And they're like always billions of years. Well, pottery is pottery. They know a man made it. And so Albright said no, and he did pottery. And so that's some of these artifacts he'd have. His pieces of pottery would tell you exactly the age of which it was done. So he could tell when these cities were taken. He did painstaking examination of artifacts and deciphering the dead languages. He knew some 25 languages. Emeritus Professor of Semite Languages at Johns Hopkins University since 1958, Dr. Albright directed numerous archaeological expeditions to Palestine, South Arabia, and elsewhere in the Near East. His publications numbered more than 800 publications. Mr. Albright found the cities listed through Judges as he was looking and excavating those areas. Again, proof, right? And so we know the Bible is true. Science can verify what we know to be true. That's kind of how we look at archaeology. Oh, that's how I look at it. I think that's how we should look at it. The Bible's true. We just got other evidence showing us that to share with others. But here we go. We got Joshua 10:42, and we see that the mood is very, very strong, very, very exciting for them. But here's Joshua 9:2, because everything we know about Joshua and the Israelites is supernatural. Am I right? It's supernatural. It didn't just happen because they were a strong nation of strength and military prowess. It was because of God. It was supernatural. Everything that happened was because God told Abram it's going to happen. And Abram followed through with the things he was supposed to do because of faith. But here, Joshua comes out, and we all know it. I'm not going to read that. But we have Joshua. And Joshua comes in and he takes the walls of Jericho down by marching around them. That's normal, right? You're going to take down a fortified city by walking around them 7 days and blowing trumpets and then they fall? You know, supernatural. And do you think that went on before them? And yes, that reputation started to put fear into those kings. And then we see that when he keeps on going, that this is the summary of all the places that he was able to conquer. And we just read that. And so these are the things that are happening with Joshua. But, you know, when we start to look at, that was the section I was looking for right there. So there you go. There's all the different sightings that we had. And so W.F. Albright article is what I just read to you. These are the places that are mentioned Judges that they said, I don't think so, but he goes in and he found them years and years ago. But the obedience that we see happening, or the partial obedience we start happening, it starts in Joshua chapter 9, verses 1 to 2. And it reads, as soon as all the kings who were beyond the Jordan and the hill country and the lowland, all along the coast of the great sea toward Lebanon, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, heard of this, they gathered together as one to fight against Joshua and Israel. Now we know that they realized there was a God that was far more than they could handle alone, and that they were going to have to band up. We know that because of that previous comment that we read in Judges. It was their God that was fearing these people. They wouldn't have done that normally. Joshua 8, 18 to 26. It's more of what Joshua was able to do with the faith and the direction that he was going with that nation. Now, these are in my mind, the examples that we need to look at, because in Joshua 18 to 26, it says, Then the Lord said to Joshua, stretch out your javelin that is in your hand toward Ai, for I will give it into your hand. And Joshua stretched out the javelin, and it was into a hand towards the city. And the rest of it, of that passage, is all about how they orchestrated this with God, with the Lord directing everything, how they tricked them and drew the men out of the city. The Israelites come in back in the city, they start burning. The men of Ai turn around, see it in destruction, and they get absolutely annihilated. That was God's plan. It wasn't Joshua just doing this, it was God's plan. And so the city of Ai became an example for the rest of that nation. Hey, don't mess with Israelite. They've got a God that is so much powerful that we don't know what to do. But here's the partial obedience that we're going to talk about. And again, these partial obediences, it's human nature. Because in Joshua 9, 13 to 18, what do we know? Can someone just read the first 13 to, say, 15, please? Joshua 9, 13 to 15 to start. These people deceived the children of Israel, beginning of verse 13 to 15. Knew this was going to happen. And so, did they seek counsel from the Lord at this point? No. Did they follow their hearts? Yes. How often do I think it's the right thing because it feels good in my heart, but it may not be what God wants us to do? That's called, partial disobedience, partial obedience. We may be still the Christian walking through, and maybe the Israelites still treachering through and doing all these things, but there was a price to pay for partial obedience. And these are the steps, and it was back in Joshua's time. It wasn't just new to the judges' time. This was in Joshua's time. They were doing these little bits of partial obedience. And so when we're walking through the book of Judges, just keep in mind, this is just a basic map. They come across the Jordan on the right. See that? The River Jordan. They come across, and there's that Jericho, and there's that Ai. It is early on in the conquest, and look at how it infiltrated all those areas around it. News spread. So, what results from partial obedience? Well, godly culture of Israel plus pagan culture of Canaan led to their demise. There was nothing good that was going to come out of partial obedience. Israel began to dwell among those pagans, which they were to drive out. Partial obedience. Israel lacked that faith-driven conquest that God had given them because they lost their determination on the attitude and execution of a plan that was given by God. These are the things that happens with these people as they start to break down. So I'm not going to go through all this here. I'm going to read this here. We're going to start next class with this, though, okay? But I don't want to come to the end and say, hey, we can't do this. Have an attitude to follow through. We're going to look at John 14:15. No sin or sinful people to dwell among us. James 1:27. Avoid partial conquest or partial obedience. There are things that we must be doing, and it is a battle. We put on the armor of God, but does it get scarred? Does it get marked up or anything, or does it stay shiny clean? These are the things we're going to talk about at the beginning of next class. We've got to learn to repent. We need to train up our future leaders. Look at the fear that entered in Judges 1, and it was real. Thanks very much, everyone. Appreciate your attention and comments.